Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Election 2021 Haldimand Norfolk Candidates Debate, live streaming from the Lions Community Centre in Caledonia, presented by the Haldimand Press in partnership with the Caledonia Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, and Windecker Road Films. Before we get started, we want to thank all the volunteers who have worked so hard to make this event possible. The candidates, of course, for taking the time out of their busy campaigning, and all of you viewers joining us who have sent in the questions we will be putting to all the would-be MPs for this riding tonight. My name is Connie Smith, and I will serve as your moderator tonight. Now, this is a wide-open race. We have no incumbents in this election, with Conservative MP Diane Finley stepping down after 17 years of representing this riding. We wish you well, Diane, if you are watching. Diane unseated incumbent Liberal Bob Speller, a former agriculture minister who had represented the area from 1988 to 2004. So, who will be heading to Ottawa after September 20th? Will it be, in order of last name, joining us tonight, left to right on your screen, Ken Gilpin of the People's Party of Canada, Leslyn Lewis, Conservative Party of Canada, Charles Lugosi, Christian Heritage Party, Karen Matthews, Liberal Party of Canada, or Megan Peronin, New Democratic Party of Canada. George McMorrow is also running for the Veterans Coalition Party and is not joining us tonight. Now, candidates, a quick note on decorum, something that in itself has become a bit of an election issue itself. We do expect a civilized, fair, productive, and equitable discussion that includes showing respect during each candidate's allotted time and not speaking over one another. I will call you out with this. So here's how everyone at home and here in the room, the evening will play out. You will each have 90 seconds to answer each question. The timekeeper will signal with a sheet of paper when you have 30 seconds and then 10 seconds remaining, and he will stand when your time is up, and again, you will hear this noise. Upon request, candidates will be given 30 seconds for a rebuttal if necessary. Now, if our viewers at home have additional questions, you are free to text them to us, and we will add them to the list, time permitting, of course. Candidates will finally be given 3 minutes for closing remarks. Now, to the questions. First of all, by way of introduction, tell us about yourself and why voters in Haldimand Norfolk should elect you to Parliament. We start with Ken Gilpin. Ken.
Thank you, Connie. My name is Ken Gilpin. I've lived in Haldimand, Norfolk for over 40 years. I've raised a family. I've been employed here. I've participated in the community life. I've been involved with community service organizations. I've volunteered. I volunteered at the Norfolk General Hospital for 14 years plus. I was in the emergency department for 8.5 years, physiotherapy, Patient Family Advisory Council, and on the Ethics Committee. I'm presently the president of the Optimist Club of Simcoe and District, and I've been involved in other organizations. Why should you vote for me? Certainly the policies of our party. I think they bring a straightforward and a truly conservative answer to many of the issues of the day. And there are several ideas that I'm bringing in also that I believe would mark me as being different to the candidates that are at the table right now, such as election reform and issues of mental health and bringing the internet at reasonable cost to everyone in the riding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Leslyn Lewis, same question to you. Tell us about yourself and why we should vote for you.
I'm assuming that these are our opening remarks?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. I would like to start by thanking the Haldimand Press for hosting us and all of you at home for taking the time to participate in this democratic system. I'm Leslie Lewis, and I'm seeking to be your next Member of Parliament in Haldimand Norfolk. I'm a proud wife, mother, and I reside in the town of Dunnville with my family. I'm often asked why I entered politics, and the answer is simple. I want to secure the future for all Canadians by making sure the opportunities that I had in this great country are there for future generations. There's so much change on the horizon, and I want to make sure that we, the residents of Haldimand Norfolk, are not left behind. I'm committed to using my gifts to serve this community of Haldimand Norfolk. I'm fortunate to have earned a solid education, and in addition to being a lawyer, I've taught at Osgoode Hall Law School, I've owned my own law firm, I've earned a Master's of Environmental Studies and a PhD in International Law. I've knocked on thousands of doors in this riding over the last year, and I've heard the unique challenges of our community, ranging from internet connectivity, water issues and shore erosion, skyrocketing house prices, and labor shortages facing employers. I pledge to you that I will be a strong advocate for our community of Haldimand Norfolk and a strong voice for your concerns in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslyn. Charles Lugosi.
I am a candidate for the CHP because its values mirror my beliefs and permits its candidates to vote and freely speak according to their conscience. I take seriously the constitutional foundation of Canada, the supremacy of God and the rule of law, which is embedded with morality that originates from natural justice, which in turn is derived from Judeo-Christian beliefs. Our cherished values, including those of liberty, freedom of speech and religion, equality, sanctity of life, and love for our neighbor, trace their roots to these same beliefs. A democracy thrives when there is vigorous and robust debate on all issues that affect our choices. That is why we are all here. We must be vigilant to stand on guard against a government that aggressively forces into law a social agenda that violates our conscience. Instead of asking, what's in it for me, the question ought to be, what is the right moral choice for all of us? Don't abandon your moral compass. Vote according to your conscience. Don't yield to the temptation to vote strategically or simply exchange one party for another which has the same or similar values. Vote for people who you trust, those with integrity, those who are honest and truthful, and whose parties and leaders mirror your cherished values. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Charles. And Karen Matthews.
Thank you, Connie. It's nice to see you again. And I want to thank everyone from the Haldimand Press for bringing us all together for tonight's debate. Last year, I made an important decision. I decided to seek the Liberal nomination for Haldimand Norfolk. And since then, I've literally had thousands of conversations on the phone with my friends and neighbors. And when it was safe to do so after I was double vaxxed, I started knocking on doors. We all share a common goal: to make sure we keep Canadians safe and our economy growing. Tonight, you're going to hear many diverse ideas about how that should be done, but know that my voice comes from my feet firmly planted in my hometown of Port Dover and the decades of work we've done together here. My roots run deep with several organizations, and each provides a unique perspective on our community. At Haldimand Norfolk Reach, I learned the value of supports for families and children and the impact they have on our community. As the GM for the Norfolk County Fair, our team and programs had a $10 million economic impact annually. I provided advice to Norfolk County Council as the first chair of the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board, and for both Haldimand and Norfolk with the Ontario Southwest Tourism Corporation. Of course, I learned that the world listens and heard loud and clear when Mumford & Sons rocked it as their only Canadian stopover on the world tour. I'm now a farm manager, and while it sounds fancy, as GM of Burning Kiln Winery, my job is to manage the farm and our retail operations. My local insights are what is driving me to run in this election.
Thank you, Karen. And now, Megan Peronin.
Hello. My name is Megan Cronin, and I am so proud to be your NDP candidate for Haldimand Norfolk. I have lived in Haldimand my whole life, and I have always been passionate about making our world a better place, even at a young age. When I was 11 years old, I competed in a local public speaking competition at the Hagersville Legion, and I spoke about the horrors of child slavery in sweatshops. At 17 years old, when students and teachers of Ontario were threatened with cuts to our education, I organized a successful rally to show that us students are resilient and value our education and educators. Today, at 19 years old, I am fighting for an economy that works for more people, a clean and healthy environment, racial injustice, better care for everyone, and closing the wealth gap. This is why I am proud to be a New Democrat. We will bring all these changes and more. And as someone who has lived in rural Haldimand in a larger city like Ottawa, I feel the difference between the readily available resources cities have to offer and what a small municipality has to offer. We need a leader who knows the issues that face rural communities and is willing to put in the work to fix them. On September 20th, you have the power to vote for a better Haldimand Norfolk and a brighter future. Vote NDP.
Thank you, Megan. Well, the pandemic, candidates, has dominated our lives for the last 18 months. This question is about that. First of all, have you been vaccinated against COVID-19? And then, what measures or methods do you think should be used to handle the pandemic and the country's recovery? We begin this time with Leslyn Lewis.
Thank you for that question. As a personal policy, I don't share my vaccination status with the public. I don't share my personal health information with the public. That's my personal information that I feel is confidential. I feel that the vaccine has been politicized in many ways, largely by Trudeau, and it's really a shame that we have seen the vaccine politicized in that way. I think it's very, very important that we take COVID very seriously and that we need to do everything to flatten the curve. I myself am pro-vaccine. I've traveled all around the world, and so I see the value of vaccines. And I think that it's very important that everyone should do what they can do to flatten the curve. They should gather information, trust the science, and make an informed decision based on informed consent.
Thank you, Leslyn. Charles, have you been vaccinated, and what measures do you think the country should be following?
Well, first of all, we should realize that vaccinations do not provide immunity. It reduces the severity of symptoms, and the hope is we're not going to overwhelm healthcare resources, and the hope further is to save some lives. Now, what I'm really concerned about is mandatory vaccination. I am vaccinated. I don't mind sharing that, but my daughter cannot be because of her health condition. So there's a lot of people in this country who can be and who cannot be. But the mandatory aspect is really a constitutional question. Under Section 7 of our charter, how can we have a vaccine passport? Because we do have a right to bodily integrity. And you've heard the phrase, my body, my choice. Now, our rights under Section 7 are limited by Section 1. In other words, what's reasonable in a free and democratic society? Well, it should be optional, based on informed consent. That's what a free society is about. But a democratic society is about equality. And what I see, and what really concerns me, is the beginning of segregation. Those who are segregated and those who are not. That's equality under Section 15 of the Charter, and we're entitled to equal benefits. That's my time.
Thank you, Charles. And Karen Matthews, are you vaccinated, and what measures do you think the country should lead us into recovery with?
So yes, I am double vaxxed. But over the past months, I've literally spent every day making phone calls or knocking on doors, talking to thousands of my friends and neighbors about what matters most to us in our community. Overwhelmingly, it was about the pandemic and how we are moving forward together. I talked to seniors who've been stuck in their homes for months missing their families. I talked to families whose children were missing their friends at school, frontline workers who were concerned about their safety during the pandemic, and while completely exhausted and overworked, they showed up every day to keep us safe. We banged on pots at 7 o'clock outside our doors. We sang "O Canada." We showed up to support those who supported us. We realized that as Canadians, our way out of this pandemic is through vaccination. Canadians want to finish this fight against COVID-19. We want to ensure the safety of our kids and the vulnerable, and for that reason, we protected ourselves with vaccinations to also protect them. I'm here to tell you loud and clear that I am double vaxxed for them. As part of moving forward, a Liberal government will launch a $1 billion COVID-19 proof of vaccination fund to support provinces and territories who implement a requirement for proof of vaccine and credentials for non-businesses, essential businesses, and public spaces. And as of September 22nd, that includes Ontario. Science shows us that the way through this pandemic is vaccination, and I question why there are people that are not vaccinated. Passports give us the confidence to get out in our communities again.
Oh, good timing. Thank you, Karen. And now, Megan.
Yes, I am proud to be double vaccinated. We know how important it is to get through this pandemic. We don't want to see any more people becoming ill, no more small businesses slipping away, and no more workers going into work sick because they can't afford the time off. The New Democrats have a plan that will not cost taxpayers any more money. The NDP will ensure that all PPE manufacturing is done right here at home. This will create jobs and make PPE much more readily available for our healthcare workers. We will extend EI to those who are immunocompromised and do not feel ready to return to work safely. We will prioritize affordable childcare and give workers 10 paid sick days. And we will support farming communities so we can expand our local food chain and provide affordable quality food. And we will get better in internet and cell phone infrastructure for those who are working at home. We will get the funds to do all of this by implementing a COVID-19 excess profit tax to the large corporations that profited off our illness during this pandemic. Just taxing Jeff Bezos alone, the founder of Amazon, we have the money to implement the much-needed pharmacare. The NDP will make the richest pay their fair share.
Thank you, Megan. And last word to you, Ken, on this question.
Thank you. The People's Party of Canada has taken a different position to the established parties, the legacy parties. We've come out very strong against the lockdowns and the mandates. We've seen what the harm is that they can do, the closing of the schools, the closing of our businesses, the closing of businesses, and the loss of jobs. Families have not been able to celebrate annual events or go to weddings. Loved ones have not been able to attend funerals. This has been very damaging, and there's been a increase in suicides, mental health issues, and drug overdoses. The approach that's been taken so far, I think, is as harmful or more harmful. The People's Party of Canada is concerned for the most vulnerable. The Ontario Health Coalition has stated that if in Ontario the provincial government had spent $13.7 billion, they could have averted this problem in Ontario. Most of the victims from COVID have been in seniors' home, and the average age, of course, around 80. $39 billion would have protected our seniors across this country. And we think that there's a better way, not the way that we've taken, and we would end the lockdowns and mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Next question, still with healthcare, though. Haldimand Norfolk's population is aging. What is your plan to address issues surrounding care for seniors, such as long-term care facilities? We'll begin with you, Charles.
So the question is about health care in general, or is it Norfolk in particular?
Specifically, Haldimand Norfolk's aging population.
Okay. I have, so we're talking about long-term care.
Yes.
Well, I think that 80%, as I recall, of the deaths from COVID have been as a result of problems in long-term care. And I think that there needs to be some national standards in terms of recognizing that our seniors who are in these homes need minimal standards. I think it's really important to give seniors an option of a caregiver to stay at home, give them tax credit. And from what I understand, what happened in Quebec, there was a lot of elder abuse. I think we need to carefully monitor the situation, recognizing that there is a large degree of provincial jurisdiction here, and so we'll need their cooperation. But I think there needs to be generous home access tax credit and generous senior care benefits.
Thank you, Charles. Karen?
Such a huge issue in rural communities. And I'm not talking about just for seniors, but for everyone. Now, my father suffered a heart attack about 7 years ago, and so he needed to see the doctor. On Friday last week, I called our local physician, and I dialed 53 times. That's the beauty of a cell phone, that it adds up the number of times that you've called. And it's not our doctor's office fault. It's the fact that there's not enough funding for healthcare in Ontario. And I know that healthcare is a provincial issue. However, there are transfers that go from the federal government down to the provincial government. And as an MP for Haldimand Norfolk, I would fight to make sure that every Canadian has access to a family doctor to start with. As part of the Liberal platform, there's $32 billion allocated to the province and territories for the hiring of 7,500 new family doctors, nurses, and practitioners, which would make a difference here in our hometown. I know that there are a lot of people that are waiting for surgeries, and COVID just exacerbated that. This is why my family and friends have been added to waiting lists. And we need to make sure that we can clear those waiting lists for MRIs and ultrasounds. And I would fight for this to immediately invest the $6 billion on top of the $4 billion already committed to support the elimination of health system wait lists.
Thank you, Karen. And Megan?
My mother is a PSW here in Haldimand, Norfolk, and worked at our hardest hit home during the first little bit of the first wave of COVID. I remember my mother coming home heartbroken because she felt like she couldn't do anything for her coworkers who were getting sick and the residents she loved that were falling ill and even passing from COVID-19. As more staff fell ill, the conditions for our loved ones worsened. Knowing that this all could have been avoided is what makes me so passionate about taking action towards better long-term care in this country. There are inconsistent standards that have caused poor living and working conditions in long-term care. The NDP and I will work with caregivers and patients to develop national care standards for home care and long-term care to ensure consistent quality of care across Canada. The NDP also knows the harm of private and for-profit homes. There is no place for greed when it comes to looking after our loved ones that are vulnerable. Doug Ford has failed all long-term care staff and residents time and time again, while Andrew Horvath and the NDP fights to protect them. It is time that the federal government steps in and ends private for-profit long-term care and fight for better pay and protection for all staff.
Thank you, Megan. And moving to Ken now.
In my experience of volunteering at Norfolk General Hospital, I got a good sense of the strengths and the weaknesses of our healthcare system, and that included long-term care facilities because we would receive patients from there and we would transfer patients there also. This COVID has brought to light the weakness and the strains that we've had in our healthcare system for many, many years. The healthcare system is the responsibility, the application of frontline services are the responsibility of the provincial government. And we need to look there, we need community discussion, we need to change the way that we fund these facilities. There's waiting lists, long waiting lists. They've been there for a long time, long before COVID came along. And yet we allowed it to happen. We were not ready for this pandemic. We were not ready for an emergency. And we swept it under the rug. We've really denied fair service to our seniors in our community. And I think that we need to have that discussion. And the People's Party of Canada would move that discussion to where it belongs within the provincial jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ken. And Leslyn.
Thank you. So COVID has been devastating for all seniors, all Canadian seniors, and many seniors can no longer afford basic things like the cost of food. And many seniors can't afford to no longer stay in their homes. And we know that the quality of long-term care has been decreasing. Our party, the Conservative Party, is helping seniors stay in their home by offering a home accessible tax credit of $1,000 per dwelling instead of $1,000 per person instead of $1,000 per dwelling. In addition, they're allowing the claiming of medical expensive tax credit, which can be claimed by family members for attendant care services, which usually could only be claimed if the senior is in a group home. In addition, there's an additional senior's benefit of $200, which anybody can claim for their parent that is over 70 years old. We also need to fix long-term care. We need to set national building standards. We need to set national building codes. We're devoting $3 billion of infrastructural funding to assist in the long-term care facilities. We're encouraging partnerships with various organizations to provide more and better long-term care facilities. We believe that immediate action needs to be taken to fix the issues that exist with long-term care.
Thank you, Leslyn. Our next question now. The Grand River has a long and complex history regarding Indigenous land rights. Locally, this has clearly been seen at Douglas Creek Estates and Mackenzie Meadows. What would be your plan to handle these conflicts going forward? And we begin this round with Karen.
Well, thank you, Connie. This is a very complex issue. And to that end, I've reached out to speak with Carolyn Bennett, who a year ago sent a letter saying that the government was willing to meet with all concerned parties. Everyone needs to come to the table in good faith. And that would include me as part of a conversation. The Band Council and Hereditary Chiefs and Clan Mothers have asked for more time. And I understand why. There are a bunch of other complex issues in the Indigenous community. But once they are prepared to sit down, I will be at the table for those conversations.
Thank you, Karen. Megan?
So for those who may not know about this, I want to give a little bit of background information. In 1784, Sir Frederick Haldimand granted the Haudenosaunee Confederacy 10 kilometers of land on each side of the Grand River after 6 nations of the Grand River peoples allied with the British in the American Revolution. What started off as roughly 385,000 hectares of land granted is now only 18,000 hectares of land. Currently, the Haudenosaunee intend to exercise their jurisdiction over land and water in a way that maintains sustainability and responsiveness to climate change to protect waterways and ecologically sensitive areas. It is important that we respect the land that they own, as it is vital for their expression of culture. I support and will join our Indigenous neighbors in fighting for ending the practice of paying out developers who do not honor the moratorium and ensure the Government of Canada uphold the established treaty relationships with the Haudenosaunee of the Grand River Territory. It is important to me to actively better the relationship between Canada and Indigenous communities, and I look forward to having conversations with these communities.
Thank you, Megan. Ken?
The issue of land claims along the Grand River have really shown themselves in Caledonia. This has been a long, festering issue that there doesn't seem to be an answer to. And one side or the other, they don't seem to be serious on finding that solution. We have to get to that solution. So we're looking to bring together all interested parties and to sit down with serious players with serious discussion to come up with a good answer that everyone can live with. But the one thing we can't continue doing is we can't continue to have a lack of law and order. That aspect of this situation has to be ended. It has to be dealt with. And negotiations have to begin, serious negotiations. I think there's a solution there. We just haven't got to it yet, but we will find that answer.
Thank you, Ken. Leslyn?
Yes, thank you. The blockade situation is not good for the residents of Haldimand Norfolk. It's not good for the Indigenous communities. It's not good for the local communities. It's not good for businesses, and it's not good for Canada as a whole. All parties and stakeholders need to sit down with a serious goal of resolving this issue. And it's not going to be easy. If it were easy, it would have been done already. But the rule of law exists, and we need to apply the rule of law fairly and compassionately and equally to everyone. Justin Trudeau has not helped to resolve this situation. We have not received any remedies or assistance from the federal government. Diane Finley, the Member of Parliament, had numerous meetings, and she has not received any assistance from the federal government. The people of Caledonia need more stability. They should not have to go through this. We have laws on the book, and we can remedy the situation. The parties need to just get together. All the parties need to come to the table so that we're not passing the buck, and we need to hammer out a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslyn. And last word on this question goes to you, Charles.
Well, I must confess that because my children are Métis, having Ojibwa heritage, that I bring a certain open-mindedness to the issue that others might consider biased. But I think that there must be justice for the Indigenous people. There have been a lot of wrongs in the past. But I do not think that lawlessness is the right answer. From my knowledge and experience as a constitutional lawyer and law professor, I can tell you that the Supreme Court of Canada jurisprudence is very favorable to hearing Indigenous land claims. It seems to me that you can talk forever, but if you have legal action and law that is very favorable, I think that will stimulate fruitful negotiations that will make it a win-win situation for everyone.
Thank you, Charles. We're going to move on to housing now. This will be a two-part question. First of all, how does your party intend to support first-time home buyers, new Canadians and others who are struggling to find housing that meets their needs? And secondly, what can the federal government do to help with housing supply issues across the country? We'll lead off with Megan this time.
Thank you. When talking to community members about the issues that they face, one of the most common concerns was the housing market. As a youth, I know that with the current market and economy, I will never be able to afford a house even with a good, stable job. The past generations of government have allowed speculators to inflate the market extremely. It is time to make the housing market work for us again. This is how the NDP will start the fight for affordable housing for all. We will build 500,000 deeply affordable and sustainable homes. We will implement a foreign buyer's tax of 20% on the sales of homes to people that are not even Canadian citizens or permanent residents. We will reduce monthly payments by reintroducing a 30-year terms to CMHC-insured mortgages on entry-level homes for first-time buyers. And we want to introduce innovative co-housing and social housing to fight homelessness and poverty. New Democrats will address the Indigenous housing crisis and put an end to chronic overcrowding and long wait lists. We will work with Indigenous communities to implement co-developed, fully funded Indigenous national housing strategy within our first 100 days of office. The NDP and I will fight for homeowners and renters that are middle class and low income, because everyone deserves a safe space to call home.
Thank you, Megan. Ken.
Thank you. The housing crisis that we're facing today, this bubble, this economic bubble, this has been building for quite some time, maybe over a decade. And this is a direct result of government monetary policy. Where do they put the emphasis of putting their money? What are the interest rates relative to the inflation rates? And they have allowed the market to grow and go wild. We're in a situation now where a whole generation of Canadians cannot afford to reach for the Canadian dream of home ownership. They can't enter the market at all. And we could have stopped this we could have had a solid monetary program that would have regulated the flow of money and limited the increase in value of the homes and the speculation that has gone on. The other aspect that affects housing is, of course, immigration. And as long as we keep our immigration levels very, very high, we have to build homes for these new entries into our market. And we're talking literally hundreds of thousands of homes. Now, when it comes to funding or dealing, making legislation or regulations for housing projects, that's in the provincial realm. I don't want to foist another level of government into this issue. I'd rather see those closest to the problem be able to deal with that problem, and that's the municipalities and the provincial government.
Thank you, Ken. Leslyn.
Thank you. Housing affordability is largely an issue of supply and demand. The Liberal solution for the housing shortage is to threaten to tax the principal residents. Conservatives will not do that. The problem that we're facing is we are not building enough homes in order to keep up with our growing population. Another problem is foreign investors. Our plan, the Conservative plan, is to implement and build 1 million new homes within 3 years. We will also make it easier for people to get mortgages. In addition, we will ban foreign investors from investing in homes when they do not intend to move to Canada. We will work with builders to build new home units and low-income rental units. We will also undertake an Indigenous community initiative for an Indigenous housing strategy in the spirit of reconciliation.
Thank you, Leslyn. And Charles?
From my perspective, there's a lot of attractiveness to what Ms. Lewis says. But I think that I can add to her idea by saying we should make mortgage payments tax deductible. That would leave a lot more disposable income and make it affordable for people. In the United States, for example, interest payments are tax deductible on your mortgage. That amounts to hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. I propose for 5 years to ease the crisis, make it principal and interest-free for families, for personal residents only, and I would consider also that speculators, foreign and domestic, they're both, should pay a penalty tax. And so this is a fresh idea. None of the parties have come up with it, but I think that it puts money in your pocket and allows you to buy a house, makes it more affordable.
Thank you, Charles. And Karen?
Thank you, Connie. I just want to clear up a misconception that there is nothing in the Liberal policy that is looking at taxing the sale of a principal residence. That's an idea that was floated in the past, and it's not something that is being touted or moving forward with. So I just wanted to clear that up. And as we all know in Haldimand Norfolk, it's not really about the foreign investors that are coming in and buying up the property. Maybe that happens in the big cities, but in Norfolk County, it's property flippers, people that are buying property, buying it up, selling it at a profit. And that's making it hard for people here to buy houses. I work with a staff of about 40 people. Many of them are under 40 years old. And it's impossible for them to get in the house market. Now, it's not that they don't make good money, because they make pretty decent money. But when houses here are going for $500,000, it's almost impossible to get in the market. So there are some things that are exciting about the Liberal plan, including rent-to-own solutions, some tax-free savings accounts for those who can invest $40,000 in them towards their first home if they're under 40. You know, there's the opportunity to double the first-time home buyer's tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000, which puts $1,500 in their pockets. You know, mortgage insurance is expensive, reducing that by 25%. But we're right, our supply is what is the crisis, and we need to build more homes, and there are things in the policy that definitely would help us build nearly 1.4 million homes.
All right, just a point of clarification, because one question that was presented by one of our viewers did ask about a home equity tax, supposedly proposed on the sale of primary residential homes. You say that's not true, just to clarify that? All right, I wonder if anyone else wants to comment on that, because this was an issue put forward by one of our viewers. Yes, Ken?
Mr. Lugosi said that came out with the idea and made the comparison with American tax write-offs for home mortgages. What I think he forgot to mention is that they have a capital gains tax that is then applied afterwards. So all you've done is delay your taxes, and this is what we would have here. And I don't know if that's a system that we want. We certainly don't want to have home equity tax of any form put on. And I don't think we want the American monetary system either.
That,
Yes.
as I'm entitled to.
Yes?
I never suggested a capital gains tax. I suggested just a deduction, a made-in-Canada solution. Don't be unfair by implying things I haven't said.
All right, are we clear on that issue now? We'll move ahead to the next question if there are no more comments on that. With local business, currently there are many employers who are actually unable to fill vacant positions. What will you do to help these businesses in the whole area of jobs and filling jobs that are going empty? And we'll start with you, Ken, in this round.
The lockdowns and the mandates, and I'd have to say even some of the finances, the monies that the government has been directing towards people to stay home during this lockdown period have all impacted on the employment structure in this riding. We've also had, with the lockdowns, we haven't been able to get the farm workers in here at the rate and the velocity that we have had in the past, and that's brought a lot of hardship onto the farmers. We need to open up the restrictions. We need to remove them. We need to stop the lockdown payments that we're giving to people to stay home and not work. We need to open up the economy. When the economy opens up, people are going to reach for those jobs, and you'll find that you'll fill them fairly quickly. It's getting back to normal is what we need.
All right, Ken. Leslyn, your thoughts on this?
Yes, I've met with a number of employers within this riding that are having a hard time finding people to work. And a part of the problem is that we have people who are at home, who are able-bodied, who are capable of working. We have restaurants who have to shut down for a certain number of days because they just do not have the staff in order to open on a full work week. Over the course of the pandemic, millions of people we know have lost their jobs, and those that are most hard hit have been in the hospitality sector and some part-time and temporary workers. But our plan is to create, to help employers recover and to create jobs. We have a plan that's called the Canada Job Search Plan, and we will actually pay employers 25% of the net salary for new hires for 6 months. We will also cover up to 50% of the salary for those who have been unemployed for more than 6 months. And we believe that this will kickstart the economy, help employers to subsidize the cost of getting back employees and bring more employees into the market.
Thank you, Leslyn. And Charles, your thoughts?
Yes, I like those ideas by the Conservatives. They recognize the fact that 70% of the private labor force comes from small businesses. And I think they are the backbone and the heartbeat of the Canadian economy. We need to be able to be wise in allocating tax credits, loans, subsidies, but more importantly, it's you people out here who always have to recognize to support your local businesses, shop locally, support those businesses, and that includes applying for those jobs. They're desperate for employees. So please, support your local businesses that way. I like the idea of a job surge plan. I support retraining, and I think we should ease requirements for foreign trained people, particularly since we know there's a shortage of family doctors. Bring in the nurses and doctors from outside the country. Ease the requirement. They are small businesses too.
Thank you, Charles. Karen.
Connie, I didn't have to meet with employers from Haldimand Norfolk. I am an employer in Haldimand Norfolk, and I have to tell you that I'm on the front line managing a farm and managing retail and hospitality. And I have to tell you that there is a little bit of a misconception about the hospitality industry in that before the pandemic, we were struggling to find people that would work in kitchens and be chefs. This has nothing to do with the pandemic. We've been able to secure frontline workers because, as you know, server minimum wage is less than regular minimum wage. And the attraction there is obviously the gratuities, and that's where the money's made. So there's been an incentive for people to take those jobs in the past. But restaurants, just to be clear, especially in tourism areas, we have struggled to find people that will work in the kitchens and be chefs. So just to make that clear. But one of the barriers for people to going back to work is that women were hit first and hit hardest during the pandemic. They were the ones that needed to go home, and we need to support women to get back to work. And one way that we are going to do that is with $10 a day childcare. This is a program that will stimulate our economy and move us forward. And so I'm excited about that. As a woman, I know how much I spend on childcare, and I think this will help spur on our economy.
And we'll talk about that more in our next question, but first you, Megan.
Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, like Charles said, and they need our support more than ever. One of the reasons why I love Haldimand Norfolk so much is when someone needs support, they will have hundreds of people showering with them with love and that support. When our local restaurants and businesses called for help, our community showed up, and we ordered takeout and gift cards, and we supported these businesses online. Of course, as a community, we will do everything we can to support one another, but we also need to know that we have a government who will support these businesses and workers. Before workers go back to the workplace, we need to make sure that they have affordable health care. We need to make sure that there is extended EI for those who are not able to return to the workplace right away. And we must ensure that there is child care. We need to make sure that mental health and dental care are at the top of our priority list. We cannot send our workers back to the economy when they cannot rely on their government to support them.
Thank you, Megan. And we're going to ask a question about childcare now, actually. Does your party intend to start a childcare program? And if so, what will that program look like? And Leslyn, we'll start with you this time.
Thank you. The Conservative plan is to enable women to choose to participate in the workforce. Unlike the Liberal plan, the Conservatives plan to give a direct benefit to parents so that they can make the best choice for their families. In contrast to the Liberal plan, an expensive Ottawa knows best approach, the Liberals have essentially been promising childcare for the last 8 elections. They have constantly made false promises, 8 elections in a row. They've had 6 years into their mandate, and now they are promising affordable childcare. After 3 decades of broken promises, we have no reason to believe their plan. The Conservative plan will recognize parents, grandparents, and other family members who choose to assist families in raising their children by providing those monies directly to their families.
Thank you, Leslyn. And Charles, your thoughts from your party's perspective on this.
Children do best in a home with both a mother and father, ideally. I was lucky. I was one of those people. And let me tell you this. Taxpayer-funded childcare, however good it may be, is never an adequate replacement. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have 5 children, And when my twins were 3 and my oldest daughter was 10, I became a single parent. I stayed so for over 11 years. And as a man, there were no programs for men raising kids alone. I mean, we all talk about the single mom as politicians, but there are men and women who are single parents, and we need to recognize both. And I think that I could have used some help with childcare. I used a Montessori school, preschool, to help me because there was no childcare available for me. And yet I held on to a full-time job. It's not easy being a single parent. So I do believe we need to help those out there, both men and women raising their kids alone. Let's give them some tax help along the way.
Thank you, Charles. And now, Karen, you can elaborate on what you started to talk about.
Thank you very
childcare.
much. You know, as a mom who used childcare, I was really in a position to work with some amazing childcare workers in Port Dover. You know, Miss Susan and Miss Chambers were fantastic. They raised half of Port Dover, did an amazing job. But it costs a lot of money to send your child to daycare. And I spoke with someone last week who told me they were spending $200 a week for each child this summer for childcare to go to camp, which is just unaffordable for the average person. And a 2016 study by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development found that Canada has among the most expensive childcare in the world. The way that we're going to come out of this pandemic is a $10 a day childcare, not a tax credit. In a tax credit situation in Ontario, it will save you about $1,000 a year. But a $10 a day childcare expense will save you about $19,000 a year. So there's two very distinct differences between the two plans. I believe strongly that we need to move forward with this so that we can spur on our economy, get women back in the workforce, and keep things moving forward.
Thank you, Karen. And Megan and the NDP.
Yes. We saw families having to learn new strategies to juggle home life and their work while at home. During the pandemic, both conservative and liberal leaders voted against childcare in the pandemic. 22 times, Jagmeet Singh proposed $10 a day childcare. But now with the snap election, the Liberals are campaigning on this. We have been campaigning on this since the start in 2019. As well, like I said, EI will be extended for parents who do not have the resources to find childcare. And the NDP want to see women and men back to work. That's the most important thing.
Thank you, Megan. Ken.
This is an area that the People's Party of Canada do not have a policy on. Yes. It's not that I'm not aware of childcare, the need for childcare. I know many people who use those services. In fact, my family has used that service. But the People's Party, we look at this from a jurisdictional point of view. Who provides the services better? Is it through the federal government? You know, we hear all kinds of money being thrown around, figures across the board here. Oh, we're going to give $10. We're going to give big money here. We're going to spend all this money. They're borrowing it all. You have to understand something. They don't have the money to do this, so they're going to foreign banks and they're borrowing it. So what we would prefer is to see an efficient approach to this that's more local, maybe provincial or municipal, something where the frontline services are you can respond to quickly, as opposed to federal oversight. Federal oversight tends to be very, very expensive, and they come in with their qualifiers. I think I heard that there was going to be some money sent specifically to this group as opposed to that group. And when we start to get into identity politics, which the Liberals actually are heavily into, then what we tend to do, and I believe Mr. Lugosi pointed this out, that we cut some people out and we ignore them. So no, provincial jurisdiction, provide the financing and the services at frontline service providers, yes.
Thank you, Ken. And last word on childcare to Leslyn.
I'm sorry? Did I not speak on childcare?
Oh, yes, you did. You led off. Sorry about that. Okay, all right. Okay, our next question has been touched on when it comes to food and farming, a big issue in Haldimand Norfolk. So we want to ask you about that. Canadians deserve safe Canadian-grown food. How will your party support our hardworking Canadian farmers? Specifically, would you commit to no further market concessions in future trade negotiations? Let's start with you, Leslyn, on that one then.
I answered on the childcare first. So,
Oh.
yeah, so I was the first one
Oh,
on
okay, so
childcare, I
Charles,
said-
sorry, okay. Charles, you lead off. Okay, yes,
Though, but I know
thank
it's his
you
turn.
for being honest and keeping me honest. All right, Charles, you go on this one.
Let me talk about food. I am amazed at the richness of the soil, especially in Norfolk County, and the amount of wonderful produce, the wonderful food that exists there. And I believe that we should make every effort to build on that natural resource we've been gifted with. And I believe that there is a real big opportunity here. Now, let me tell you something. One of my children has an immune type disorder, and she can only eat organic foods. And I believe that there's a great opportunity to have organic produce, organic foods, organic drinks, and so on being produced here in Norfolk County. But one thing that concerns my daughter is the price. Why should it be so exorbitantly high? I don't know the ins and outs of why it's priced so high, but if it's good for you, let's make it cheaper. And in terms of any international trade deals, I want to promote what we have to get the best possible opportunities to take our goods to market so that we can be prosperous and make the farming community prosperous. And we can be proud of all of them.
Thank you, Charles. Karen.
Well, as everyone knows, I manage a farm. It's a winery. It's a fancy way of saying I manage a farm. But at the end of the day, there are many things that we need to move forward with around agriculture. And I am directly responsible for the temporary foreign worker program on our farm. So I understand the stress that farmers go through on an annual basis when we have to put in our LIMA, when we have to do our advertising, when we have to move forward with all of those steps to make sure that we do have a strong food chain in Canada. During the pandemic, millions of dollars worth of crops rotted on our fields because we didn't have the workers to do that. And I'm excited that there is conversation at the national level by the Liberal Party to put in a trusted employer system to streamline the application process for Canadians hired temporary foreign workers. Now, if you think about it, we've had the same workers on our farm for 30 years. Those workers come up each year to get our crops off. It really helps the farmer, a process of streamlining would really help the smaller farmers and the larger farmers, but particularly the smaller ones who don't have a full HR department. And if you talk to farmers like Dusty Zamanek from Easy Grow Farms, he's been advocating for this for a long time. The other challenge is transferring workers from one farm to another, and this trusted status would help us do that more easily.
All right, thank you, Karen. And Megan, I think you touched on this a little bit before, but please elaborate on your thoughts here.
For sure. Haldimand Norfolk and all of Canada depends on our farmers. I grew up in a rural area in Haldimand and with the neighbors as farmers, and I saw them working day and night tirelessly to help us. And I know the pandemic has taken a toll on our farming families. But what the NDP and I will do to show our support for farmers and agriculture business will include investing in the high-speed broadband internet and cell phone infrastructure that we need to do these jobs. We will protect supply management for farmers and consumers in all trade negotiations. We will create a pan-Canadian food program strategy that will make us leaders in sustainable food production. And we will be equipping farming communities with tools to respond to the effects of climate change. Most importantly, we need to support our farmers physically, mentally, and financially. I know that this job is so demanding, and it is important that we have the health care intended to support our workers. And most importantly, we need them to be healthy in order to get more local food on the plates of Canadians. And we want to expand the local food chain. But to do that, we need healthy and happy farmers.
Thank you, Megan. Ken?
The question, if I'm correct, was, are we going to allow any more trade concessions when dealing with agricultural products?
How will your party support our hardworking Canadian farmers, and specifically, would you commit to no further market concessions in future trade negotiations?
It's hard to say that there can never be concessions. There's concessions on both sides of negotiations. And I don't know what negotiations would come up in the future, but when it comes up to agriculture, when you do go into negotiations, you always have to think about food security and food safety. And I know we hear a lot about the local produce and local products as being high quality. They are high quality. They're high quality because we've built this agricultural network and system over decades of experience. We're here to support that. Where the People's Party takes some concerns with is in the marketing. Now, we know the marketing boards are there. I think in many cases they work quite well. And we do get that food security and food safety built into it. But we also limit our markets so that we can't expand beyond. I know there's problems between interprovincial trade that limits agricultural products moving, and certainly across the border with the United States. We would look for ways and means to open up markets to the farmers while at the same time protecting the security of our food sources and above all, the safety, which we have some of the safest food supplies in the world. And I think that's just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Leslyn and the Conservative Party's thoughts on this.
Thank you. I believe that there are many areas in agricultural trade that Canada could benefit from if the barriers were removed. For example, the Asian Pacific preferential trade agreements and investments in physical trade infrastructure focus on Asian Pacific trade. We need to focus on preferential trade agreements within the agro-food industry and agro-food markets such as China, India, and Japan. Our farmers are the bedrock of society, and without them, the entire country would go hungry. We have seen the weakness in the global food supply chain, and we need to pay more attention to the needs of farmers. There are a number of policies that I would advocate in order to secure our food supply. We need to reform the tax rules to make it easier for intergenerational farm transfers, and it should not cost more. A person buying a farm from their family member should not be taxed higher than from a stranger. We need to restore the Stability program to cover 85% losses. We need to invest in research and development so that farmers are getting credit for practices such as sequestration in climate change. There are many areas of trade, international trade, that we need to focus on to eliminate barriers that our farmers are currently facing.
All right. Thank you, Leslyn. Next question, and again, this is a very specific one put forward by one of our viewers. The Chief Nursing Officer position, which provided advice on a broad range of health issues and policies, was previously eliminated at the federal level. Do you believe this position should be re-established? And Karen, we'll start with you on this.
Well, honestly, my heart goes out to those nurses that are out there working on the front line. And I know locally, just recently announced in the press that they're closing down the tripping over that one today, the baby place at the hospital.
Obstetrics.
And you know what? It's because we don't have enough nurses, and we're not keeping our eye on being able to provide enough nurses across the country. And so, like, the Liberal policy talks directly about hiring more doctors and nurses, and I think it's a fantastic idea to have somebody at the federal level keeping their eye on nursing and the nursing situation in Canada, because during the pandemic, that was a tough go for everyone out there. And so with everything that's happening in terms of not having enough nurses, a shortage, not having enough training and available nurses, I think it's a fantastic idea.
And Megan, your thoughts on that?
Yes. As I said, my mother works in healthcare, and I understand how important it is. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw our nurses all over the country being stressed and not having the support that they need all the time because of how much the pandemic has put on their backs. And as the NDP party candidate in this area, I want to ensure that all of our nurses have better mental health care, because we know how traumatizing this has been. And as well, we know that being in healthcare, it is so important that we have our 10 paid sick days, especially with a virus where it can take up to 14 days to quarantine. And as well, the NDP wants to do hiring bonuses for people, and we want to be able to rehire those who may have lost their jobs in the pandemic but are ready to return. It is so important that we are supporting our nurses, and we will do everything in our power to be able to support them because we need them in our community.
Thank you. And Ken?
Thank you. I had a great opportunity, as I say, volunteering at the Norfolk General Hospital to work with nurses and see them in action. I actually, the term hero is appropriately applied. And long before this COVID situation developed, I saw them going above and beyond often, sometimes staying after work, not being paid, to make sure specific patients were taken care of. And they did that a lot because there's always been, since I started volunteering 14 years ago, a shortage of nurses, and I've watched a steady drop in the funding for hospitals and for services in Haldimand and Norfolk regularly for the whole period of time. I've watched services at the hospital being taken away. When I first started, there was 112 beds, and when I left, there was 98. There were specific services that we used to provide as a general hospital. They were no longer provided. And a lot of the nurses were being hired on as part-time because the hospital, for the money that it was receiving, couldn't afford to hire full-time staff. So this is a problem that actually should be laid at the feet of the provincial government, that they have been cutting services to Haldimand Norfolk for far too long. We have an aging population. We need to have those services revitalized and reaffirmed in this district. So yeah, this is a problem of funding, plain and clear.
All right, thank you, Ken. And Leslyn?
I think that our nurses are our heroes, and our party is very, very serious about funding healthcare, and so we will increase transfer payments to healthcare. It is important that we recognize our frontline workers, and the nurses have been there through this pandemic. It is very, very important that we make sure that we create the capacity to make sure that they are well staffed, and that in order to do that, we need to look at our education system. We need to look at how we qualify nurses. We need to look at our immigration system, our credentialing system, to encourage people. If we have a shortage of nurses, we should also be encouraging people from other countries to come here and utilize their skills in a capacity that will assist our country.
Excellent, thank you, Leslyn. Charles, do we have total agreement on this one?
Well, this is not the time to cut positions in healthcare.
Right.
I'm a bioethicist. In addition to being a law professor, I've taught healthcare. I've taught bioethics. My doctorate degree involved both constitutional law and bioethics. So from my perspective as an educated person in the area, I think that we are making a mistake when we're doing harm to people by cutting positions that are essential for the community. I recognize that there are jurisdictional issues and, with provincial responsibility, but there's many, many reasons why we need these nurses. We need to relax requirements for foreign trained medical staff. We need to give help to those who are dying from fentanyl. We need to support Canadian companies who are capable of producing vaccines. we should defund paying for services that do not cure or heal. We need to fund health care as defined by law that will cure people, that will help people. And so cutting positions like this may be politically expedient, but not wise at all.
Thank you, Charles. And moving on with a few more questions that have actually come in tonight while this debate is underway. Megan, I'll have you start off with this one. During the last election, electoral reform was a primary topic. Do you believe electoral reform is needed? And if so, what system would you support?
Yes. I believe that electoral reform is important, and I believe that the NDP party will support this. And I think it is important that we are up to date with the policies and the federal electoral reforms and everything. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Your thoughts on that, Ken? Election reform.
We have a dysfunctional democracy. Right now, we're in the midst of an election. And it's an unusual election with this pandemic and other reasons. But this is the only time that we get these discussions taking place where questions are posed, answers are given, and debate takes place. And it takes place within the community because people become aware and discuss, and they hope to have some influence. Outside of that, come September 21st, democracy dies in Canada. It's simple as that. We need election reform where we can have participatory democracy, where we are fully invested in participating in the democratic process of this country, and we need to have transparency to do that. Election recall rights of your elected member if they're not following, if they're following party rules, as we see with legacy parties, we need to bring that form of reform in place. And I think we have to review the whole process to make it more available to everyone. Simple as that. So, yes, election reform, top of the list.
Thank you, Ken. And Leslyn, where are you on this?
Well, the first past the post system is constructed for the purpose of making sure that smaller regions within the country have representation and have a outcome in who gets elected and who becomes the prime minister of our country. So I think it's very, very important. I think it's a noble system. However, I do see shortcomings with our democracy per se, and perhaps it's not with our voting system. I would like to see more collaboration across the floor between the parties after they're elected. I would like to see parties working together more, and instead of the adversarial approach and tearing each other down, building each other up for the benefit of the country. And so after the election, it would be nice to see bills and legislation that is collaborative and for the betterment of the entire nation.
I think a lot of people would like to see that too. Charles, your thoughts on electoral reform?
Electoral reform is long overdue. I say that because the existing system has frozen out leaders of other political parties. Mr. Bernier, for the People's Party, he's running at about 5% in the polls, and yet he doesn't have a chance to be in the leadership debate. My own leader, Rod Taylor, nobody's even heard of him, let alone invited him to any debate. I think that if, for example, and this is very common in Europe and other progressive countries, if you have a party with 7% of the vote, and another one with 12%, and another one with 1%, when you do the numbers, and if they deserve 1 seat, 2 seats, 10 seats, they get seats. Their voice is heard because people have voted for them. But the way our system is right now, they're shut out. And it's just winner takes all. That's the system. I'm in favor of proportional representation. And think about this. Let's think outside the box. Why not have a separate vote for the prime minister? You may not like the leader of the party. Choose the Prime Minister separate from your local candidate. We can all improve this system with a little bit of thought.
Thank you, Charles. And last word on electoral reform to you, Karen.
Well, I'm sitting here smiling because there's someone on my campaign team who interviewed me for an hour and a half about whether or not he would actually work with me. And one of his main conversations was around electoral reform. And so I'm kind of glad this came up. One of the conversations that we had was around the size of our riding. Our riding is the size of Prince Edward Island. This is a huge area. It takes about 2.5 hours to drive from one side to the other. And so, currently we have 338 ridings in Canada, and is that something that we should be looking at? But I tend to have to agree with Leslyn Lewis on this, that I think that I believe that good ideas are good ideas, and that we should move those ideas forward. And I think that as a liberal, I've always philosophically aligned myself with the party for which I'm most aligned with. So I agree with many of the principles of the Liberal Party. We are humans, we're never going to agree with 100% of everything that we do together. But at the end of the day, I think we need to find a way that we can all work together for a better Canada and moving it forward. So.
Excellent answers. Next question about your views on abortion and its legality in Canada. And Ken, we're going to ask you to start that one off.
That's been a polarizing issue for a long, long time. And people dig their feet in pro and against. I question, why does the federal government fund it if it's such a polarizing issue? I believe in the right to life. That is my position. That's my personal position. The party itself is not taking a position on this as a policy. If I were to say how I would approach this, I certainly would not restrict it. I'm not looking for restrictions. But I'm very concerned that you have a section of the population who are being taxed to fund this service and are very much against it. And I'm wondering if that's the best way to go with this. I'm not so supportive of making it a tax-funded procedure.
All right, Ken. Leslyn.
Well, this is a very popular subject for the Liberals because they use it as a distraction for every time there's a scandal, they bring up an abortion issue. I personally believe in the sanctity of human life. And I know that my leader, Aaron O'Toole, he's pro-choice. And the beauty about our party is that we could respectfully have different opinions, and we also could have a policy that represents all Canadians. I believe that Canadians, right now, what I'm hearing at the door, I haven't heard one person talk about a pro-life issue at the door. Canadians are so consumed right now with COVID. They're so consumed with their personal lives. They're so consumed with the issues around the economy and their survival. So this issue is often brought up by the Liberals as a wedge issue because it is a divisive issue. But it is a personal opinion that people have, and we, in a democratic society, we have to be respectful of people's beliefs, and it may not translate into policy. Stephen Harper had a majority government, and he never changed the abortion laws. So it doesn't always translate into policy, but we always have to be respectful of people's beliefs.
All right, thank you, Leslyn. Charles, your thoughts on abortion and its legality in Canada?
The scientific truth is that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being that has done nothing wrong. The mother's body is separate from the body of the child. They have different DNAs. Both are unique individuals. We live in a world of a legal fiction. By law, the unborn child is excluded from the definition of human being. Thus, abortion is legalized homicide. The government has today the power to decide who is and who is not a human being by using the power of legal definitions. Elected members of Parliament have the power and the duty to make laws that are consistent with the truth. I would ensure that no human being, for any reason, be excluded from the definition of human being. My colleague has said that she personally believes in the sanctity of life, but in her leadership campaign, she said in 2020, I have not proposed anything to limit abortion. I am pro-life, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's the greatest human rights abuse in human history, the loss of over 1 million Canadian lives.
All right, thank you, Charles. Karen.
You know, for me, this is a healthcare issue. This is not a women's issue. This is a healthcare issue. And I want to say that there's no woman that sets out wanting to have an abortion. No one wants abortions. At the end of the day, it's not something that we would choose. I believe that a woman has a right to choose. And I can't believe in 2021 that we are still having this conversation about abortion. Anti-choice organizations are really actively working to try to spread misinformation about abortion and putting the health and risk and safety of young people and vulnerable women at risk. There's a lot of misinformation. And I have to say that 100 men can go have sex and get 100 women pregnant. At the end of the day, women can have sex once and become pregnant, and this becomes a woman's issue. It's not. It's a healthcare issue, and I believe in a woman's right to choose, and I will always defend that.
All right, Karen. And how about you, Megan?
Yes. Religious rights are so important. I have my own religious beliefs and moral beliefs, but they will not take the rights away from women. I believe everyone has a right for your own opinion, and if you do not support abortion, do not get one. But do not take away the services for the women who need it. Those of you who are anti-abortion, please do not call yourself pro-life, because what life are you supporting? Are you going to support the women who are sexually assaulted and have to carry the child? Are you going to support the mothers who are losing their lives because of medical issues? And will you support the LGBTQ homeless youth and the children rotating in the child welfare system? If you are going to be pro-life, then we need to have solutions, and we need to educate youth on sexual education. We need to give them the tools. We know that it is going to happen, so we need to give them the tools in order for them to do it safely. No matter what your religious beliefs or personal beliefs are, we cannot take away this necessary reproductive right from women.
All right, thank you, Megan. We're having some more questions come in from our viewers. This next one is about the pandemic once again. With Haldimand Norfolk having one of the lowest vaccine rates in the province, how will your party plan to address this? And Leslyn, we'll start with you on this.
Our party has a policy to encourage through education, information, not demonization. We believe that the issue of getting vaccinated is one of education. We believe that we should adopt a unified approach and we encourage all people to do whatever they can to flatten the curve, and that means finding out information, trusting the science, and basing your decision on informed consent.
Charles?
Repeat the question. I had trouble hearing it.
No problem. With Haldimand Norfolk having one of the lowest vaccine rates in the province, how would your party plan to address this?
Well, I think you have to look at not just the lowest vaccine rates, but what is the incidence of the disease? If we're doing well with a low vaccination rate, that should tell you something right there. Vaccines ought not to be mandatory, and I think I touched on that earlier. I think informed consent is vital. You have to look at the statistics and the medical evidence and decide what is best. We know For example, in a heavily vaccinated country like Israel, people are getting sick from COVID and they've had double vaccination. See, vaccination is not immunity. It's not the answer. I think that people who are vaccinated still need to wear masks, still have to social distance, practice precautions, and so on. But I think we also, while we're on the topic, it is outrageous, in my opinion, that in terms of opening up travel to vaccinated people, we're not recognizing the Chinese vaccine or the Russian vaccine, which are just as good in terms of what they do for people. So I think we shouldn't have inequality in that respect. So I think that vaccines are good, they have their place. I have chosen to be vaccinated, but I'm not forcing anyone else to.
All right, thank you, Charles. Karen?
Well, one of the things that's going to spur vaccinations in Haldimand Norfolk is a double vaccination passport that we will be needing for non-essential services. You know, when they announced that in France, 1.7 million people were vaccinated because they wanted to be able to go out and enjoy the freedoms of going to restaurants, going to movie theaters, and going to concerts, and enjoying indoor spaces. The Liberal government is suggesting mandatory vaccines on planes, trains, and in public service. And I think that anyone who wants to travel understands that we need passports. We have passports to go everywhere. And at the end of the day, it's not foreign to us. Our children all carry a passport, a yellow passport. When my daughter was 11 years old and going into grade 7, I had a call from the health unit saying she can't come back to school unless she gets that shot. Now, we all remember when they're kids that we get them on a regular basis. But as they get older, you tend to forget. And so this is not something that's foreign to us, and I think that that is going to spur on more vaccinations in Haldimand Norfolk, as we need to have a passport to enjoy our life.
All right, thank you, Karen. Megan, your thoughts on that, the low vaccination rate here in Haldimand Norfolk?
Definitely. I believe that the low vaccination rate may come from miseducation. And we want people to be educated on the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine. We know that people want to make the choices, but we want you to know that the choices are helping to save lives and protect the vulnerable people. And I encourage you to get your vaccine. We need to get our vaccine so then the people that can't get it because of disabilities or medical conditions in their age can be protected. And I think for vaccine passports, I think it is no different than having a driver's license to be able to drive a car, having 2 pieces of ID to purchase alcohol, having a passport to be able to go travel. And as well, we have immunization records. We've been having them since we were born, and we are vaccinated. And I encourage people to view this in a different light, as it is important that we are protecting our community.
Thank you, Megan. And Ken, last word on this to you.
The whole process needs to have informed consent to be legitimate. Through this pandemic, what we have seen is we have seen doctors silenced, we've seen epidemiologists silenced, we've seen many experts that have been silenced and pushed to the side. We have a singularity in voice as far as these vaccines are concerned. And that part is concerning to me because that goes against all the traditions and I would even say legal bioethical approaches that we've taken throughout medicine in Canada. I don't believe, and the party will not enforce, mandatory vaccines. We don't believe in, you make the choice with the right information, and if you choose to take the vaccine, that's great, that's your choice. But we shouldn't force people to do it. We're going to create a dual society of those who are vaccinated and those who are not. And we should not be denying people their opportunity to participate in the public square because they've not been vaccinated. They've taken a different choice. They may want to go with natural immunity and herd immunity. That is their choice. But we shouldn't be restricting them and denying them to participate and get the fullness out of our community and society and to participate. This is just, the whole process of forced is a problem for me.
My entitled to?
Yes, a
Yes.
30-second rebuttal, yes.
Earlier in the debate, Ms. Matthews had made a comment that she does not know why anybody would not be vaccinated. And I want to state very clearly that there are people who are medically incapable of being vaccinated. And so we need a compassionate society. We do not need a society that demonizes people and that are pitting people against each other, because we do not know what a person's health condition is. And for us to, and that is one of the reasons why I oppose people asking about your vaccination status, because you will have to reveal your health history to them, and that is an unfair position to put a person in.
All right, thank you, Leslyn. Any other comments?
As well.
All right,
to the
go
Liberal,
ahead, Charles.
Candidate. The path that her party advocates is segregation. We know that segregation in society is wrong. It's evil, it's discriminatory. And I think that we need to put a stop to that. We should not give benefits and burdens out in society. We need to be united as a people and be tolerant, compassionate, and understanding. If you want to travel internationally, get the vaccine passport. Domestically, we don't need it.
And yes,
Would you allow me a little bit of time
yes,
to
you,
respond?
each one can rebut once.
Thank you,
yes.
Connie. You know, I look at what's happening in the U.S., and all I have to say is Florida. There are people that are dying in Florida begging doctors to give them vaccinations because they didn't have them. There may be people, and there are people, who will not be able to get the vaccination. But at the end of the day, those of us who can should be double vaxxed. We vaccinate for those who cannot be vaccinated so that we can save lives.
All right, all good on that one. Oh, one more. All right,
Sorry.
Megan, your 30 seconds.
I
Yeah.
do want to rebut. I think it is very privileged for Charles to think that this is segregation. We are asking people to care about others in our community, and this is a public health crisis, not a political crisis. And to think that forcing people to get a vaccine is taking away your rights, I think you need to check your privilege as a white man.
First of all, I did my DNA, and I'm more Asian than white, so you can just say my Asian privilege, please, all right? Thank you.
All right.
I think it's highly oh, go ahead.
That was inappropriate. That term is inappropriate. It doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong in the arena of debate and discussion in this country. That's identity politics, and keep it to yourself if you don't mind. And as far as Mr. Lugosi's statement on segregation, it's already happening. I am in contact with people who can't go to university because they haven't taken the vaccination. They've taken a different choice, a different route, and that's what we should celebrate and we should support. We need to come together and work together. We all are in this together, but we shouldn't be forcing people.
Okay.
And that comment was inappropriate.
All right, I think we've all had our chance to rebut that. So we have one final question, and then we're going to move on to our 3-minute final comments, closing remarks, all right? The final question, I'm surprised this hasn't come up earlier. What are your party's views on climate change? And Charles, we'll let you start this one off.
I'll be happy to say that climate change is real. And from my study of world history, climate change happens whether or not mankind has been polluting the environment or not. I think that the climate change that I think that is criticized by parties like the People Party is to say, well, we don't really have the evidence that it's our fault or man's fault. We need to study this more. We have to have wisdom to balance the competing interests. People out in the prairies who can't afford the carbon tax to heat their home are going to suffer and get cold. People in Alberta, their economy is suffering. because the Liberal government has done everything possible to shut down the oil and gas industry. I think that we don't want to overreact. There has to be a proper balance. You know, from the time I was in high school, I was a member of Pollution Probe years ago. I've always believed in protecting the environment. We should do so, but let's keep our reason and logic together.
All right, Charles, thank you. Karen?
I believe climate change is real. And if I look around this room today, I think everyone else has to acknowledge that there's climate change. We've all been out knocking on doors in 40 degrees Celsius weather and melting into the pavement. So something's going on in our climate. I think that we need to think about it globally, but act locally. And there's so many things that we have done in Haldimand Norfolk to help combat climate change. And I want to talk a little bit about the Alice Project, which is a project that was started by farmers in Norfolk County and something that has gone nationwide. And it's about farmers taking those little pieces of their land that they don't use for farming anymore. And in our case, on our farm, it's irrigation ponds. We don't need that to grow grapes anymore. Our roots run deep and we can get into the water. And so we've taken that and turned it back to nature. And we're in the middle of a world's biosphere. So climate change and the environment is super important to us in this area. With that being said, carbon tax credits are being used to develop some of these projects that go right across the country. And I think that the idea of moving to ending plastic waste by 2030 is amazing. That's something that we can all do to help fight climate change in the environment. And of course, the idea of creating some new national parks where we have more trees and more fresh air is exciting to me as well.
All right, thank you. And Megan?
My generation, among the Indigenous communities, partnered with Indigenous communities, I should say, have been at the front line for the climate change movement. This results from us being afraid of the state for our future. That's why we are so passionate about this. Climate change is real, and I know that the NDP plan for the environment will better our economy, our relationship with Indigenous people, and will make life more affordable and support our farmers. My father works at Esso Refinery. Yes, we want to move away from fossil fuels, but we know it will not go away overnight. We don't want to see millions out of work. That is why the NDP plan will be creating over 1 million jobs that will help make energy sources more efficient and sustainable, housing more sustainable and affordable, and for cities, better and cleaner transit, which is important. Strategies for sustainable farming and tools to respond to the climate crisis will be invested. The money to do this will come from the cancellation of the pipeline, as we know what threat it imposes when, not if, it breaks. As well, the New Democrats believe that the Canadians should not be punished with a carbon tax when the issue is much larger than us. Instead, we are going to tax the large polluters like Amazon, who profit off of worsening our environmental state. Most importantly, we will make Indigenous people's protection of the land and water a priority. The NDP will work directly with Indigenous communities in order to tackle both environmental crisis and protect Indigenous rights.
All right, thank you, Megan. Ken, and climate change.
I think we'd all be in agreement that pollution is a bad thing, and we've all called for restrictions and changes and regulations to deal with pollution. But I'm not so sure that carbon dioxide should be listed as a pollutant. It's plant food. Plants take that in and they give off oxygen. It's part of the cycle of life. We have to be very careful on how we're going to apply our approach to issues of climate. I believe that we're rather arrogant to think that we can control the climate. It's not something that I think is going to happen, certainly not through taxation. And what we have from the Liberals and the Conservative is a program of taxing what they call carbon. And what this is doing, and we can see it on our gas bills, we can see it when we fuel our vehicles, it is lowering our standard of living, it is raising the costs of living, and it is killing off some of the industries that supply the energy that keep this society running. They are cutting off the economy for Western Canada in the name of climate change, and they have nothing to replace it with. You're not going to replace it with electric cars replacing carbon or internal combustion vehicles. It's just not going to happen. So it's a pipe dream.
All right, Ken. And Leslyn.
Thank you. Canadian Conservatives have a very serious plan to protect the environment, and we will do this while repealing Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. Our plan protects the environment by boosting jobs and stimulating our economy. We know that Canadians can't afford the carbon tax hike, and that is based on the backs of lower income Canadians primarily. We will look for innovative solutions. Ms. Matthews spoke about the ALICE program, so I won't go into that. But one issue that is dear to me is the issue of orphan wells within this community of Haldimand Norfolk. Within the community, there are 6,000 orphan wells. I've met with a number of residents who have orphan wells on their property. It would take 500 people, 500 jobs would be created by cleaning up these orphan wells. Many of them are on private lands, and the farmers cannot afford the cost, which is $50,000 a well to clean it up. The province has allocated, the federal government has allocated $1.72 billion towards the program, but we would need another $270 million to clean up the wells in Ontario, and a large number of them are in Haldimand Norfolk. I propose that the federal government take this issue of orphan wells very, very seriously. There is hydrogen sulfide that is being emitted in the air, and that's affecting the peaceful enjoyment of residents in this community.
All right, thank you, Leslyn. All right, candidates, it's time for our closing comments. And in keeping with moving along with the order of things, we'll let you lead off, Karen, with your closing comments, and then we'll go around this way. All right?
Okay. It's different than we thought, but yes, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you, Connie and the Haldimand Press and the other candidates that are here tonight. I've enjoyed sharing my views and ideas for moving forward together. We've talked a lot tonight about big ideas and how our parties propose to move our country forward, and maybe now is a great time to reflect on the role of an MP. The role is really threefold: legislating in Parliament, representing our ridings, and serving our constituents' needs. MPs are elected to represent the interests of the people in their constituencies. Our country is divided into 338 ridings. These are set up for geographical representation so that unique viewpoints from across the country can be presented in Parliament. This requires a strong local voice that can share concerns from the riding and to advocate for us. I decided to seek the candidacy for the Liberals to be a strong, truly local voice. And my decades of Haldimand Norfolk experience makes me the right choice to speak on our behalf. All of the candidates before you come in with the same amount of political experience. None have served constituents as a member of Parliament, but I am a candidate who has worked closely with our community for decades. My opponent claims to be delighted to call Haldimand Norfolk her home, but after losing the leadership convention, she was considering where her best options were to run. In a CBC interview, she said that if the decision were hers alone, she would choose Alberta or Saskatchewan because they were warm and welcoming. Never in her comments did she mention Haldimand Norfolk. I didn't pick this riding as an opportunity. I was driven to run to ensure that a truly strong local voice represents us in Ottawa. There are other differences between the candidates. I believe in a woman's right to choose. In 2021, women's rights shouldn't be up for debate. I ask you, do you want someone who wants to turn the clock back on women's rights? You think that can't happen? Just look at Texas. On abortion, Ms. Lewis told her supporters in the leadership race that she's pro-life, no hidden agenda. I ask you, do you want someone who refuses to march in a pride parade? She refused, saying that she wouldn't before, and so why should she now? Well, leaders show up for all of their constituencies. Ms. Lewis also stated that she is firmly opposed to the federal government's push to ban conversion therapy, a practice that the World Health Organization has called a serious threat to the health and well-being of those affected. I ask you, Doesn't it make sense that the person who represents you has lived and worked here? Someone who has spent decades investing in our community through hard work, working with our community, and together we have achieved great things. Former MP Diane Finley and her late husband, Senator Doug Finley, believe so strongly in the work that I've done here that they presented me with a medal during the Queen's Diamond Jubilee to acknowledge the amazing work I've done in partnership with our community. I've been recognized by the Rotary Club with a Paul Harris Fellow and named one of the 9 women of influence, recognizing extraordinary women in Norfolk who make a difference. I'm ready to step up and be the true local voice that we need in Ottawa. On September 20th, I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Karen. And final remarks from you, Megan.
Thank you all for listening and taking the time out of your night to learn more about your candidates. I am proud to be your NDP candidate in my home riding. As a youth, I have a valuable perspective on the issues that affect my community and my future. I am passionate about making this riding a place where people want to work, live, and thrive in. When I first told my parents I wanted to study political science in post-secondary, they said, "Oh great, you're learning how to be a professional liar." It is so sad that many people believe this because the past governments have deemed this statement true. But it doesn't have to be this way. Jagmeet Singh has a plan for Canada that will put our middle class and lower income families first. We, as New Democrats, are tired of seeing the rich profit off our illness, vulnerable people, students, families, and our resources to survive. The NDP have fought throughout this pandemic to get the support we needed to the millions of Canadians who had their lives flipped upside down. We need to get our economy up and running again, but we cannot do that without physically and mentally healthy Canadians. When I dream of a better future for Canada, I see Indigenous communities with clean drinking water, and there are people celebrating their land and culture. I see our cities becoming greener, and less people displaced because of climate change. I see less addiction and mental illness, but the proper support available if needed. And I see our seniors are treated with dignity and respect. I see the wealth inequality gap closing, and our struggling families and people living comfortably. And I see everyone having a safe space to call home. I have many other dreams for Canada and our future. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP will be the party to make these dreams a reality, and I want to bring these changes to my home. And I want to be a part of these much needed changes. In this election, you can be a part of this change too. Be bold and vote NDP.
Thank you, Megan. Ken.
Thank you. It's always difficult to get all the issues out in a debate and such little time to speak on it. But I'll give my opening address as my closing address. Individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. These are the guiding principles of the People's Party of Canada. I'm going to give a quote from Martin Luther King, which I think is so appropriate in these difficult times. The ultimate measure of a man is not when he stands in the moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the moment of challenge and controversy. We live in difficult times. In this election, you will be choosing your future, the future of your children, and the future of your country. Do we let the forces of insurrection unleashed, cancel culture, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, lead us down the road of amnesia, where we forget our history, vilify our heroes, discard our founding fathers, and tear down our statues? Do we embrace the new reality of authoritarianism, which has been brought on by this COVID through emboldenment of lockdowns, dehumanizing mandates, segregation of fellow citizens, and mandatory vaccine passports? Do we continue down the road of economic decline, where government spending and debt and money printing drive up inflation, lower our standard of living, and deny a generation, a whole generation of Canadians, the opportunity of home ownership? I think not. The People's Party of Canada will restore your charter rights and freedoms permanently. No more mandates, no more lockdowns, no vaccine passports. We are the only party determined to end this madness of forever borrowing money and debt. We will have a monetary policy. We are the only party in this election committed to restoring our country's heroes, honoring our founding fathers, and celebrating our past prime ministers, such as Sir John A. Macdonald. We'll celebrate their good works, and we will learn from their triumphs and from their mistakes. Freedom, responsibility, fairness, and respect. Vote PPC Party on September the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And Leslyn Lewis.
Thank you. Tonight you've had the opportunity to hear where we all stand on certain issues that are dear to your heart. When you head to the polls, you will be faced with one choice, a choice between 4 more years of failed policies of Justin Trudeau or a conservative government that will restore prosperity, honor, and dignity to this country. During the past 6 years, Canada has become more divided than ever before. We have accumulated debt at an unprecedented rate of $1.1 trillion. Our cost of living and inflation has dramatically increased. We've lost respect on an international stage. I've knocked on thousands of doors over the past year in Haldimand Norfolk. I've spoken to business owners, residents, associations, and special interest groups, and I've heard what is important to you. We need to elect a member of parliament who can hit the ground running to tackle tough policy issues. We need solutions to issues such as poor internet connectivity, the skyrocketing prices of houses, the lack of supports for seniors, and the labor shortages faced by farmers and business owners, along with solutions to environmental and safety issues. My background as a small business owner, an educator, and international lawyer has equipped me with strong advocacy and negotiation skills that I will use to make sure that Haldimand Norfolk is not left behind. I have worked within politics at the local community level, assisting MPs on policy issues for over a decade. As your representative, I pledge to you that I will always fight for a free, united, and prosperous Haldimand Norfolk. I would be honored to have earned your vote. Canadian Conservatives are the only party with a plan that will recover jobs, get our financial house in order, grow our economy, and secure our future.
Thank you, Leslyn Lewis. And Charles Lugosi to conclude the wrapping up comments.
In 1997, I was a social conservative candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party and lost. Since then, I have witnessed the abandonment, betrayal, and marginalization of social conservatives within the Conservative Party and realize our future is in the Christian Heritage Party. I believe in justice, civil liberties, and equality, and advocate the repeal of any law that denies truth and perpetuates a legal fiction. Our laws discriminate against innocent, vulnerable human beings who have yet to be born by removing them from the definition of human being. So if any of them die by an abortion, that act is outside the definition of murder. A legal definition cannot change the truth. Erin O'Toole and the Conservative Party are pro-choice. Leslyn Lewis previously served as National Director of the Women's Legal Action in Education Fund, LEAF, which is probably Canada's most radical feminist pro-abortion and pro-LGBTQ legal advocacy group. I share your desire for a change in government, but not at the cost of our moral principles and values. I have the freedom to speak on behalf of social conservatives everywhere who are found in every political party, including those who are silenced in the Conservative Party. I am a statesman, not a politician. I know what it is like to be a single parent, having raised by myself over 11 years 5 young children, 2 of them with autism, while continuing to earn a living. I've overcome physical disability, persevered to become a lawyer, a constitutional law professor, a bioethicist, trained to solve the complex problems we face in this pandemic that threatens our health, freedoms, and civil liberties. I love this writing because it feels like home. My parents fell in love in Cortland. My first date was in Port Dover. My children enjoyed the beach at Long Point. I canoed down Big Creek into Lake Erie. Many treasured friends live in the riding. What unifies us are moral and cultural values in our Constitution, giving us freedom to worship or to freely speak without being oppressed or canceled. We desire healthy bodies, minds, and a green environment, lower taxes, an affordable cost of living, and a prosperous economy. We reject segregation and want freedom to work, to enjoy life, travel, to worship, and to maintain our culture, history, and traditions. Let us not abandon our moral compass and vote with a clear conscience.
Thank you, Charles. I would just like to thank you all for your commitment, your passion, and for putting yourselves out there. Goodness knows it's not easy, especially in these unprecedented times. And just a quick nonpartisan comment. Megan, you're 19 years old and a university student. You do a lot of activist work, and I just want to applaud young people out there everywhere who are stepping up to bring a new generation into our political landscape, as well as all of you for being with us tonight. I hope to all of you with us in Etherland at home, I hope tonight's debate has helped you decide who you are going to send to Ottawa come September 20th. So on behalf of the Haldimand Press, the Caledonia Chamber of Commerce, Realtors Association of Hamilton Burlington, and Graham Bashu behind the camera with Windecker Road Films, thank you all for joining us, and please don't forget to exercise your duty to vote September 20th. Thank you, everyone, and good night. From Caledonia.